Words on a page. It's not necessarily what you first think of when you think of a film, but that is where it, by the natural order of things, first finds true form. Something that I occasionally like to do is flick through a film's screenplay, particularly a film that I enjoyed. I'm not going to claim that I read them cover to cover, but flicking through gives a little insight into the thoughts of the writer and the creative direction that this story eventually took, especially if the screenplay is a little different from what actually turns up on screen. I was thinking about this while researching my latest old-timey book review, where I explore how silent films were written in the 1910s. The scenario, as it was known, of those years developed, gained spoken dialogue in the late 1920s, and across the decades, industry standards were put in place in regards to formatting, from the font used to how to lay out a scene. Yet, still, the scenario of then and the screenplay of now contain, in prose form, the story that the film is to tell, its blueprint. I remember reading at one point while researching silent films how one idea about a film's longevity could be that the scenario is adapted over and over again across the decades, like a play being restaged. Shakespeare's original cast is hardly still touring, but his plays are being constantly performed. That was the principle suggested. For context, it must be remembered that celluloid was not as long-lasting in its first decades as it is now. The reels degraded with repeated use, they were much less chemically stable, much more flammable, and let's just say they were stored with only limited consideration for climate control. There were not national archives to protect films as part of a country's cultural heritage, and once they're gone, they are very much gone. Films, therefore, were considered temporary things of perhaps just a few decades, as evidenced by the fact that the majority of silent films are lost. But the scenarios could survive much more easily than spooled reels of film, needing no more care than any other book or paperwork. Now, this idea that the scenario for a film would serve in the same manner as a theatrical script as an outline for the restaging of a particular popular story did not come to be how the medium of film evolved. This we know. Remakes exist, of course, but that's slightly different. Yet, it must be said, with many silent films, the scenario and a few still photographs used for promotion are all that survive. Anyway, I've already gone down a century-spanning tangent. What I'll be reeling off in this video is a few collector's editions, home releases, that come packaged with the screenplay. It is a rare combination, at least from what I've seen. But what I like about them is how they allow you to, in one place, see both the finished film and its blueprint. So, let's head over to the bureau and take a look, shall we? We'll begin with this collector's edition of Walkabout 1971, Nicholas Roeg's survival adventure set in the sweltering Australian outback. This release is from Second Sight Films. I believe I bought it in 2020. If somehow my accent hasn't given it away, I am UK based, so any editions I speak of here are likely specific to this region. Within the set itself is the film, newly restored with extras, an illustrated essay book, the first draft of the screenplay, and, quite uniquely, the original novel on which the film is based. As to the screenplay, I appreciate that they specify that this is a previously unpublished first edition of the screenplay written by Edward Bond, with Roeg's creative input in regards to the direction of the story. There is a 2-page introduction at the start, in fact, that is genuinely informative in regards to what this tells us about how the story developed from page to screen. For instance, it notes here, in terms of similarities, the sparseness of dialogue with characters speaking only in a few words at a time, as with the film. But in terms of differences, it notes that Rogue added his trademark intercutting of scenes in the editing room. They're not represented on the page. With the screenplay, it also offers the dialogue of the Aboriginal boy, which the audience are not privy to in the film, most of the audience, as there is no translation provided via subtitles or anything like that. I want to return, though, to my appreciation of Second Sight films, including, alongside the screenplay and finished film, the original novel on which all this is based. With this, you have the opportunity to compare James Vance Marshall's original novel with Rogue's film adaptation. The novel, written as a children's story, presents the outback as a place of both peril and gentle wonder, focusing on the resourcefulness of the young protagonists. In contrast, Rogue's finished film presents the outback as a sublimely hypnotic place, imbued with a sense of existential unease. The novel is tamer, the film harsher. The inclusion of the novel, first draft of the screenplay, and the final film all together in a set allows for a rewarding comparison if you choose to take your time with it. Next up are two BBC ghost stories presented by 101 Films. Is it 101 or 101? I don't think I've ever had to say it aloud before. Anyway, they offer these chillingly designed editions. Ghostwatch terrified viewers when first broadcast on the BBC in 1992. It begins as a slightly jovial ghost hunt live broadcast and descends, over its runtime, into a distressing possession of the broadcast itself. There was a warning note of sorts before it was first broadcast, but many viewers simply missed this, perhaps turning the channel over a little late, which meant that, as UK broadcasting legend has it, many viewers were convinced that it was actually happening live on air. This is helped by the gradual build-up of supernatural happenings to catch you off guard, and moreover by the fact that it was actually presented by Michael Parkinson himself, lending a real authority and gravitas to the evening's entertainment. The recognisable TV presenters cast for it all used their real names, I believe. With the screenplay provided in this Blu-ray release, I appreciate seeing all the little notes in pencils, the lines, little sketches on the page. It's not just a reprint of a script, but a scan of something used. I also like how structured it was when thinking about the editing and how the footage would be linked together, with some of the clips repeating. It's spooky just reading it off the page. The writer, Stephen Volk, truly had a clear idea of how to lead an audience and tell a ghost story fit for the television era where families gathered around the glowing light of the TV screen. I really do suggest, if you have a chance, watching Ghostwatch for yourself, preferably at night, in a darkened room. The next ghost story too uses communication technology to chilling effect. Written by the legendary Nigel Neal, creator of Professor Quatermass, this is the 1972 TV ghost story, The Stone Tape. A dilapidated Victorian mansion, a new owner. Builders refusing to renovate. You see, there is something just not right here. Odd noises, feelings of unease and discomfort. Spending too long there, and particularly in the older subterranean part of the house, the stone foundations being of Saxon origins, makes you feel unsafe, although you may not know why. The story of the stone tape employs what's come to be known as the stone tape theory when it comes to ghosts, sometimes also known as residual hauntings. The hypothesis is that traumatic incidents releasing high amounts of negative emotion can be imprinted onto certain materials and buildings, the hauntings becoming something that is replayed, projected, echoed down the ages under specific conditions, and leads to people witnessing what they think are apparitions. As in this theory, the stone walls themselves record and replay, is it any wonder then that older buildings are more likely to be haunted, especially if horrific happenings have occurred there? Then, from this theory comes other questions. Can such a recording be replayed at will? Could it even be recorded over? And if so, how? What adds an extra layer of horror to the supernatural of the stone tape is the much more down-to-earth sexism among the scientists, Neil using both the supernatural and mundane to create an oppressive sense of unease for Jill, a computer programmer in a traditionally masculine field of study. Then, to all these supernatural happenings and sexist remarks, add the BBC radiophonic workshops, electrophonic soundscapes. What you have is a gloriously unsettling hour and a half. I would rank The Stone Tape as one of the best original ghost stories put to film, even if it was shot on videotape. The screenplay, packaged in this Blu-ray edition, appears to be a shooting script. It even says camera script, so it includes a lot of camera directions and is in a slightly different format than the two screenplays we've previously looked at. The Stone Tape was broadcast on Christmas Day in 1972, making it part of the BBC's Ghost Story for Christmas tradition, albeit not actually an official instalment of the Ghost Story for Christmas series that is still being kept alive by Mark Gatiss. 101 did a wonderful job with both these releases, Ghostwatch and The Stone Tape. Obviously the image quality can only be digitalised and upscaled so far, but it's okay sometimes for old things to look old. As for the final set, what I have here is the well-renowned British noir classic known as The Man Who Is Neither First, Second, nor Fourth. Released in 1949, The Third Man was shot on the streets of Vienna, still partially in ruins after the Second World War. The screenplay is by Graham Greene, and the film was directed by Carol Reed. It has a famous supporting role played by Orson Welles, but the performance of real note, I feel, is from the leading man, Joseph Cotten. This 4K release I have here is part of Studio Canal's Vintage Classics range. Anyway, what's most important, other than the film itself, is the fully annotated shooting script. Interestingly, this scan is from the Carol Reed collection, so it shows the director's thought process as he went through the film, with little changes in pen or pencil. A comparison of the Ferris wheel scene in the screenplay and how it appeared on film shows several notable changes in dialogue. You can see lots of scribbles on the page, but, well, watch it yourself. You'll see there were even more changes in front of the camera. Some alterations were simply in regards to the order of the dialogue, but also, most famously, the iconic cuckoo clock line spoken by Wells is not in the screenplay at all. If a few lines can be changed, improved, so be it, but you need a creative environment that allows for fresh ideas and also a good deal of trust in the process and each other. This is what I get from going through this scribbly and scanned screenplay for The Third Man. It went from Graham Greene's clever, tight-knit screenplay, and through Reed's directing, the cast's performances, the composer's score, everyone's effort, it became a classic. Looking over these collector's editions, they really do highlight not just the importance of a good film, but the skill and resourcefulness of the design and production teams that brought these Blu-ray releases together. I'm a big proponent of physical media for all the usual reasons related to the fact that if it is just held through an online service, then it is never truly yours. It is nice to be able to hold something in your hand. If you love a film, then just having it, a copy of it, on your shelf can brighten a room. Its presence can have an impact, even if you haven't watched it for months or even years. The possibility is there. Returning to my point about silent film scenarios from the start of this video, I think it is easy to lose sight of the fact that still, to this day, a film can hardly be considered a permanent thing, at least not to the same extent as a treasured book. It can now be said to be preservable for lifespans much longer than a human. But even then, to view the film, you need a special device, whether that be an analog projector or a digital Blu-ray or 4K player connected to a screen. I can hardly watch Walkabout by just staring at the disc. In this regard, the preservation of screenplays as the blueprint of a film that can be picked up and read, and its required care being little different from a book, is worth keeping in mind. I note that most of these releases we've looked at in this video are for films that could be described as in some way having cult appeal rather than being mainstream, although The Third Man would be an outlier in this generalisation. Nonetheless, in the realm of the more limited revisitation of slightly niche films, the home media companies that release them often engage in a fair bit of imaginative design and give you extras that make them truly definitive in a way that you don't often see for more mainstream releases. As to my ideal Screenplay combo edition, it would probably be one for each of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, packaged in sturdy cases like the Ghostwatch and Walkabout sets, or one for an older classic like Lawrence of Arabia, if they had David Lean or Peter O'Toole's annotated script anywhere in an archive. That would make it truly special. Or just an old favourite like The Princess Bride, with the novel accompanying the screenplay and film. But that would be inconceivable. Or, I've been talking about silent film scenarios, something perhaps from the BFI like Hitchcock's The Lodger, alongside a copy of the archived scenario. What do you think, dear viewer? Is there a film it would give you particular pleasure to see packaged with its screenplay? Let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for joining me as I reeled off a few film and screenplay combo editions. Like and subscribe if this kind of thing interests you. This, I hope, will be the start of a series of occasional videos that are loosely film related, which will be titled Reeling Off, just like my more conversational book videos are flicking through. I like to be a little playful with my video titles, but also strive for consistency. Anyway, if you would like, please join me here again on Phantasoscope. As for now, fade to black.